Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing my friend Kathleen Jennings. We started working together in the Attorney General's office back in the 1980s. Much better preserved than I am. One of the sermon this morning about human justice and godly grace and generosity. Although God is gracious and unjustly generous, human institutions need to be just and fair. And we both worked under Attorney General Overly. And one of the things that I remember that was formative in my life, and I suspect it may have influenced you, was it didn't matter who you were treated equally by Charlie. And sometimes if you had privilege and you took advantage of it, he didn't like that. I remember a president pro tem of the Senate who got his third DUI, and Charlie did not allow him to escape. That was formative, that somebody of that nature could not get away with it. And I left in the 80s, and Kathy, you came back to the Attorney General's office a number of times as chief deputy and state prosecutor, and I think it's part of your DNA to be involved, and it's the Department of Justice, not the DA or the state prosecutor's office. And so I know that's been a really big part of your career. And the Attorney General representing the people of the state of Delaware means more than just prosecutor. You have to be fair to everyone. And I know that's been a big part of who you are and how you've administered the Attorney General's office in the first term and now in the second term. So with that, the topic is criminal justice reform, but I know you want it to be an open forum and an opportunity for discussion. So if there are questions or topics that you want Kathy to talk about, anything other than how you would handle particular matters, which would be part of prosecutorial discretion, I think it's probably open for discussion. So with that, I'll give you Kathy Jennings.
Right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
My mother always said I had a very loud voice. I am sure we'll be able to communicate effectively. Richmond, thank you so much. You know, I always say that the bonds that form in the Attorney General's office last a lifetime, and they surely do in our case. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to talking with you in an interactive way. I see many friends in the audience, and it's just part of what's best about Delaware, what our governor calls a state of neighbors. It truly is. It is so different from every other state and Attorney General office in every other state that I interact with, because we are small enough, we know each other, there are very few degrees of separation among us, and we are still able to get stuff done, as Governor Josh Shapiro would say. Only he doesn't say stuff like stuff. Let me begin with a story. Actually, two stories that will tell you basically what got me to the position I'm in now and formed my priorities in life. I really never intended to be a lawyer. I was going to be an English teacher, but somehow I fell into going to law school, and it was quite the journey. I knew immediately that criminal law was a calling, that criminal justice was a calling, and that the rule of law was so incredibly important for that system to work properly with all of its checks and balances. But nothing really prepared me for being a young prosecutor, or as I grew as a prosecutor, an older prosecutor, than the cases I was handling each and every day. Two of them in particular, I think, bear mention in my journey. You may know that I also spent 16 years in private practice, making enough money for my kids to go to college. And in that period of time, I also defended people accused of crimes. So I have seen both sides of our criminal justice system. In the years that I was a prosecutor in the office, first of all, I was the second female prosecutor in the entire criminal division at the time. There was one other who took me under her wing, Lucy Serino. I will always mention her name. She was wonderful to me. We all need mentors, all need mentors. But as I worked my way through the criminal justice system, there happened to be a guy who abducted, tortured, and murdered 5 women in the space of a year along the Route 40 corridor south of Wilmington. The first woman he abducted was, I believe, on Thanksgiving evening. She was taking that Thanksgiving dinner from her house in Brookmont Farms to a friend who had AIDS at the Wilmington hospital. She never made it. So she was the first victim, Shirley Ellis. The crimes were cookie cutter images of each other. He would abduct very vulnerable women. Some of them were in the sex trade. We now think of them as having been sex trafficked. That's not the way people talked in the 1980s, but they were. This particular woman, the first victim, was trying to better herself. She had enrolled in nursing school. She had bought her uniform, her books, her life was going to change. But she did not realize that that would be the last night she would. These were horrific crimes, absolutely horrible. We spent a year in a task force investigating to find out the identity of this man. And we were successful in no small measure due to the strong dedication of law enforcement of our office. And it was literally a year I spent investigating this guy. We prosecuted him and we convicted him. I spent a great deal of time during that investigation getting to know the women of Route 40. I knew them personally, they knew my name. And after the prosecution was over, there were a lot of news articles about this case. It was a big deal. We were just so grateful that he was convicted because he would never have stopped what he was doing. But I came back after the conviction to my office. I had been working out of a task force, not even in my office, for a very long time. And I came back to my office and there was a bouquet of flowers on my desk. And I looked at the card and the card said, Deputy Attorney General Kathleen Jennings, thank you from the women of Route 40. Wow. You treated us with respect and dignity, and we are grateful. I never forgot that. And that has formed my belief in the need to provide justice to victims and to realize that we need to meet survivors of violent crime where they are. And we need to help them. And we need to recognize from where they come and the struggles that they endure in their lives. Struggles, we all have struggles, but theirs are profound. And so that's one of the reasons we created the first human trafficking unit in our office and sought funding and drafted the legislation that would enable us to do that. So victims are at the core of my belief that they deserve respect and they deserve justice. Fast forward to when I was in private practice. One of the cases I took on was of a man named Lawrence Johnson. Lawrence was, I think, 16 years old when his older cousins brought him down from New York He and his cousins lived in New York. Lawrence had no criminal record. I think he had a truancy violation as a teenager. But they brought him down to Delaware to Lancaster Avenue, where there was a gun store. And they asked him to be the lookout while they went in and robbed a gun store. His adult cousins, one of them shot and killed the owner of that gun store. They all fled with a bunch of guns, and literally they were caught within a half an hour by the Delaware State Police. And so Lawrence, who was still 16 when he was tried as an adult for murder, felony murder, and all of the counts that encompass the gun charges from their stealing the guns. He was convicted of those crimes, and so he received an adult sentence of several life terms. I first met Lawrence when he had served more than half his life in Smyrna prison. So he was in his 30s. His mom hired me initially to see if I could get him some relief post-conviction, which is not an appeal, it's called post-conviction relief. I was in front of a sympathetic judge, Judge Tolliver, whom I love. And even he didn't buy my arguments. We were back to square one, and I went down to Smyrna and I met with Lawrence to give him the bad news. And I remember we were meeting between glass in those days, and I put my hand up to the one side of the glass and he put his hand up to the other. And I said, Lawrence, we lost this one, but I will never forget you. And if there is a way for me to get you out of jail, I will. Fast forward a couple of years and the US Supreme Court decides Miller v. Alabama, in which the court held that an automatic life sentence for a juvenile is cruel and unusual punishment. And there should be an individualized sentencing hearing before someone receives that punishment. Lawrence was the first petition that was filed. I filed that on his behalf. Then I came back to the Attorney General's office as state prosecutor, and he was the first person released in Delaware under that law, or that case. And, you know, since then we passed a law that requires individualized determinations, and Lawrence is a free man today. So those two things, they're very different teachings within the criminal justice system, but they tell us that justice is a very broad concept. And the role of the Attorney General, the role of our office, is to make sure that we are looking out for the rights of the victim, we are looking out for the public, and we are looking out for the accused. When I took office in 2019, and look, I am so proud of the work that the people in our office do. They are amazing. They work each and every day, and it doesn't matter what job they have. They could be administrative assistants, paralegals, investigators, prosecutors, consumer fraud advocates, you name it. When I talk to the people in our office, and there are 550 of them, we are the largest law firm in the state. I'm looking at a bunch of lawyers in this room, so my apologies, but we are the largest law firm in the state and the most effective law firm in the state. And when I talk to people in my office, what I hear invariably is, I love my job. I love my job because I know I'm helping people out. And they are each and every day doing that. And so there's no other job a lawyer can have where you get to say that, where you get to say that each and every day you are helping the people of your state. It's the best job in the world. But it requires work, and it required change, because our criminal justice system was so dependent on charges, consecutive sentencing, you know, doubling up on charges, sometimes to the nth degree. And we were looking at numbers of years without looking at the why. So we initiated a bunch of internal reforms that required prosecutors to look at the why. Is this person really need a jail sentence? If it's nonviolent and they can be safely treated on the outside, and if they need to be treated on the outside, how do we get them the help they need? How can we best fashion a resolution that gets them the help they need? And so that's required in our office. Let's not stack crimes, and we don't need to do that. And let's give people a second chance. The first person I hired in the office after I was elected is a young man named Corey Priest. I met Corey. He spent 2 years in jail for drug charges. Corey came out and I met him at the Achievement Center, which is a reentry center in Wilmington. And I was on the board and I just thought, this guy is remarkable. He goes into the prison and convinces people to go into the Achievement Center, which is a year-long intense rehabilitation program that encompasses all services that someone could need. It's tremendously successful, and there are reentry centers all over the state now, but they take an enormous amount of work. And Corey was just doing a fantastic job, and I said, would you come work in our office? Corey said, wait a second, you want me to work in the office that prosecuted me on the same floor as the prosecutors? I said, yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do. So Corey came and he knocked on the door of his prosecutor. Now they're good friends. And he has changed, along with others, the real culture in our office. We do community resource fairs up and down the state. He is working on trying to rehabilitate the highest risk people in our state. It's called the Group Violence Initiative that the governor started. We're a big part of it. And he actually is the one who police chiefs call when they need help, who prosecutors come knocking on his door and say, I think I can give this person a chance. What do you think, Corey? Tell me about it. And he'll dive in and give the right answer. So he's just been transformative in our office. That's the kind of work we get to do. And so we then next decided we were going to work with the legislature. Actually, Val Wilmhurst came to me and said, I want to do criminal justice reform. So I said, good, so do I. And we got 11 bills passed. I won't go through all those bills, but for the most part, they were designed to right size the charging process and the prosecution process. The first bill, Senate Bill 1, was an expungement bill that enabled people to get a second chance. Because it had occurred to me for a long time, and I'm sure to all of you, that you couldn't get a job at McDonald's if you had a criminal record. And there was no easy way to get that white plate. So Senator Darius Brown and I worked together on that. Mm-hmm. And I remember testifying on the Senate floor. I said, this isn't a Democrat bill. This isn't a Republican bill. This is a jobs bill. And it passed unanimously. It passed almost unanimously in the House. And now thousands of people have been able to get expungements. During COVID, we went through an enormous rise nationally of violent crime. In Delaware, our schools were closed of necessity. Our courts were closed. There were no criminal trials for over a year. And so crime just shot up. And it told me many things, but it told me that enforcement is important too. When it comes to violent crime, we need to enforce our laws and protect the public safety. So I believe in rehabilitation. I believe in second chances. I believe in discretion about who we prosecute and who goes to jail. But enforcement is a part of the core of what we do. And if public safety is at risk, we're going to prosecute the case. And so it's really important that we acknowledge that. I have never used the phrase defund the police, and I never will. The Wilmington Police Department, I work with them each and every day. We have a program called GunStat to try to get rid of guns in our city and to go after people who are shooting other people with, illegal guns. So that's an important component of what we do too. And what we noticed was that with changes in the law, we got some of our bail laws changed. And we're about to go to a no cash bail system, which is more fair. And I don't know if Lynn Spielhorn is here. She's not here. But Lynn and I worked hand in glove to get fines and fees eliminated for people who couldn't pay them, because it just was imprisoning people over and over again because they couldn't pay their fines and fees. But GunStat, which is what our program is really important too on the enforcement side. And so the work of the police has been instrumental. We have gone after gun traffickers in our state. The majority of guns recovered at crime scenes in our state come from our state. That's not a good thing. They come from Delaware. And it then occurred to me that we need more laws. We need gun safety laws that make our state safer. You know this, I'm sure. The leading cause of death in our country for children is guns. It's guns. And so I am probably the bane of the NRA existence in the state of Delaware. I'm proud of it. I shout it from the rooftops, but I truly believe that gun safety laws lower crime. The most important of which was permit to purchase. We got it passed after working 5 years. Thank you, Sarah McBride, and others in the Senate who had the courage to keep going with this, Tizzy Lockman being prime among them. But it took us 5 years in this blue state of Delaware to get that passed. It lowers gun violence dramatically. It lowers gun homicides by 20%, gun suicides by, I think, 40 or 50%, and straw purchases, illegal purchases by 75%. Who wouldn't go for that? It's a shall issue law, which means that all you have to do is take a gun safety course, a training course, know the laws on gun safety, get a permit, and you got your guns. You got your handguns. And so I am optimistic that even with our Supreme Court, we will get this affirmed, because it's definitely going up. Every one of the gun safety laws that got passed by the legislature is now being challenged, and we're defending them. So we're in a, I would say, an uncertain environment, to put it mildly, with the Berlin decision. But I remain optimistic. I respect the rule of law, and we're going to try to make sure that permit to purchase is upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was upheld by our neighboring circuit, which is the Fourth Circuit in Maryland, very recently, as was the assault weapons ban. So fighting violence is just so multi-pronged. And because of all of the partners, it's advocates who are out there and who are believing, and you should believe, in the power of redemption, who believe, and you should believe, that you are your brothers and sisters' keepers. It is those groups. It's those groups all over the state of Delaware. It's reentry efforts. It's community efforts. It's legislative efforts. And it is, in part, enforcement efforts that make our state so much safer. Violent crime is down 30% in our state. It's down, I think, 50% if you go back to when we started counting statewide stats in 2008. And that is a really good thing. The most common reason a person is in prison right now is because of a violent gun felony. The least common reason is possession of drugs. So I think we're getting there. The prison population dropped as a result of these changes. Now it's leveling out, which I think is an understanding that maybe we're not sending the wrong people there. Recidivism, so reoffending, has dropped 60% in our state. So those three measures, someone asked me, I think at the University of Delaware when I was first running, how are you gonna measure success? I say, violent crime goes down, prison population goes down, and recidivism goes down. Those are three pretty good measures. And if we can sustain that, and that's a big if we can sustain that, then I think we are well on our way in Delaware to becoming a much safer, healthier state. Having said that, there are moves afoot, obviously, outside of us in a national way to increase penalties, to do a whole lot of things that I think would be taking us backwards. But we'll fight it. We fought it in 1920 and we'll fight it again. And we'll make sure that people's rights are protected. I think that's fundamental to the work we do as Attorney General. And I haven't even started down that road, but I can tell you that we are ready. We are ready to fight the rollback of your civil rights. We will not let that happen in Delaware. And we've been preparing for over a year for this eventuality. So happy to talk about that as well. But we're rolling up our sleeves and we're going to be ready. So talk to me.